Please welcome a program manager from DARPA's Information Innovation Office, Dr. Joshua Elliott.
All right, so DARPA has a long history in intelligence augmentation, and AI plays a crucial role, especially as we move towards symbiosis at higher levels of cognition, asking machines to help us think and to understand complex problems, rather than just helping us to crunch a lot of data. The first era of human-computer symbiosis was ushered in by such early DARPA visionaries as JCR Licklider and Doug Engelbart. In 1960, Licklider boldly suggested that the contributions of humans and machines would eventually blend together completely. Now, this was at a time when most experts in the field believed this was definitely impossible and probably not even desirable, because the failings of the human operator would just slow the computer down. An Air Force study that was commissioned at the time predicted that within 20 years, machines alone would do almost all of the complex problem solving for the US military. Licklider accepted that AI was coming, but he suggested that in the 20 or maybe 15 or maybe 500 years until computers completely replaced humans on all cognitive endeavors, human-computer symbiosis would make those intellectually the most creative and exciting in the history of mankind. Doug Engelbart wanted to make this early vision a reality. Using DARPA support for his wild ideas, he founded the Augmentation Research Center and set about reimagining the interface between humans and computers. We just celebrated the 50th anniversary of what came to be known as the mother of all demos, in which Engelbart demonstrated in one session word processing and hyperlinked text and collaborative document editing and video chat and the first mouse-based pointing system and on and on and on. It probably took a little bit longer than he would have expected, but I think it's pretty clear that Engelbart's vision of intelligence augmentation through personal computing eventually won the day. I want to tell you about a new generation of programs at DARPA that are seeking to augment human intelligence with human AI symbiosis in order to better synthesize and curate and apply scientific and expert knowledge to some of the most complex problems of our time. All right, consider a clinical researcher that's looking for new treatments for cancer. The cell signaling pathways that go wrong in many cancer patients are complex chains of chemical reactions. Many of the individual components of these chains have been studied separately, but piecing thousands of them together into an actual holistic model of the pathway is a very daunting task. It really may be the case that a near-complete model of the cancer that our researcher is trying to study has already, in some sense, been discovered. But the knowledge is distributed across thousands or millions of different publications with no way of curating and synthesizing them into a type of model that can be used to evaluate potential interventions. The Big Mechanism program sought to address this problem and discover the big mechanisms of cancer hidden in the literature. Using natural language processing and automatic knowledge extraction and assembly, Big Mechanisms succeeded in building new causal models of cancer pathways and identifying valuable new drug targets. Another exciting outcome of the program is a tool called influence search. This tool makes the process of exploring and synthesizing expert knowledge from the medical literature more like an interactive modeling challenge. Users can get suggestions for new concepts that might be relevant to their problem. They can find connections between these concepts, and they can drill down to the source document and even to the precise sentence where a piece of knowledge was extracted. The most recent versions of the tool even connect directly to databases of clinical and drug trials that might be relevant to the problem that the modeler researcher is considering. So Big Mechanism pioneered these tools but for one domain and for one relatively well-structured knowledge source in the form of scientific publications. More generally, scientific knowledge is stored in places that can be much harder to reach, such as tables, equations, and even scientific model source code. All right, forget about the clinical researcher now. Consider a new graduate student in environmental science, very excited. Right off the bat, they are assigned under the important task of modeling the toxic effect of ozone pollution on plants, and then integrating that model into the lab's global ecosystem model, which constitutes, 1 million lines of Fortran code or something. This is a dissertation-level project that takes years of research and coding and testing and debugging. But this isn't the first lowly grad student that has been assigned this task. In fact, dozens of research groups around the world have studied ozone toxicity and have produced code and papers and documentation filled with equations and parameter tables. The ASCII program is developing approaches for machine-assisted extraction and curation and machine-assisted inference across these heterogeneous sources and at different levels of knowledge abstraction. The Big Mechanism program is primarily situated at the central level of abstraction, in the graphical layer, where knowledge can be easily explored and amended with new information as it becomes available. But knowledge can also be represented as mathematical formalisms that can be expressed as code that can be compiled and executed for quantitative analysis and prediction. ASCII seeks to connect these representations so that a scientist can interact with knowledge at any of these levels and seamlessly move between them, extending the knowledge at the graphical level and automatically producing executable code. Using these tools, our student can abstract their existing ecosystem model up to this graphical level, where they can explore the causal interactions between variables, study the different subsystems of the model and build a rich understanding, and of course, add new knowledge into the graph. They can get suggestions for how ozone toxicity has been structured in other similar models and how it's been parameterized, and they can rapidly try many different approaches and prototype and test. As exciting as it is to apply AI tools to these important scientific questions, we also want to solve some real-world problems that have real implications. Operational design is an essential part of the military decision-making process at every level. We start with a question, we put some of our smartest officers into a room, we give them access to the best intelligence, and we ask them to assemble the available knowledge about the system in order to frame the operational environment, to brainstorm a model of the system in order to understand and frame the problem, and then to come up with and evaluate a set of possible solutions. This is a fundamentally unbounded challenge. The problems are really not fully understood until the solution itself is formulated. These solutions are never true or false. At best, they're better or worse, or more or less risky. And of course, there are no do-overs. Every attempt to solve a problem changes the system and the problem. The doctrine of operational design has evolved over decades. It is manual, it is iterative, and it is time-consuming. And it's also very messy. A good team brings together many different perspectives. They argue, and they explore, and they try out different corners of the problem and solution spaces. And this is by design. Complex systems have complex problems that require complex and adaptable solutions that have been exhaustively explored. Now, unfortunately, even though the doctrine for operational design has continued to evolve, the tools we use for operational design really haven't changed much at all. Doug Engelbart, in fact, would be shocked to see that 50 years after he showed us the future in that demo, and we're still using big white pieces of paper and colored markers in order to support some of the most important decision-making processes in the world. The Causal Exploration program is developing mixed initiative technologies to augment the operational design process. The tools won't replace the need for military planners or really even make their job any easier. Instead, they're being designed to sort of turbocharge every aspect of the planning process. The process starts with a familiar whiteboard, but with powerful AI tools underneath. This begins with machine reading and knowledge extraction and organization that allows the planner to access orders of magnitude more information than they would be able to synthesize by themselves. The resulting knowledge base can then be converted into a computable causal model of this complex system that they can use to frame the problem by asking what-if questions and evaluating the second and third order implications that would be completely impossible to analyze by hand. CAUSEX then allows planners to consider large numbers of scenarios and solutions, evaluate trade-offs between different possible solutions, and explore risk around the different options. So it was Dwight Eisenhower, if I could get a little big now, Dwight Eisenhower who once said, "Planning is everything, but the plan is nothing." It's the understanding and the intuition that's created by the planning process that matters. That's what makes it possible to adapt as the ground inevitably begins to shift under our feet. The CAUSES system takes initiative in many areas. For example, suggesting new causal variables or new connections between variables. But it definitely does not replace the need to brainstorm and collaborate and argue and explore. Instead, it makes it easier to capture the results of the collaboration and the expertise of individual teammates and bring their unique insights together into a complete model that greatly improves the understanding and the intuition created in the planning process. Okay. So you've made your plan. It's a great plan. What about when you need to translate this plan into a detailed course of action? Consider now a mission in South Sudan, exploring options for disaster relief and humanitarian intervention in one of the most complex and intractable systems in the entire world. You've framed the operational environment, you've explored the problem space, and you've generated a set of solutions to try and address the issue. But all of your models suggest that your plans are extremely sensitive to the risk of flooding during the rainy season. In order to move forward with a robust course of action, you need high-resolution and high-fidelity forecasts of flood risk and intensity. Fortunately, there are hydrology models that have been developed for decades by expert scientists precisely to predict the risk of flood. Surely they should be able to address your needs. But given that you don't exactly have time to commission an expert hydrologist to come and do an assessment of your region and generate an expert forecast, how can you access and use these models to develop not just the forecast, but the deep understanding and intuition that you need in order to move forward on your course of action? World Modelers envisions a future where analysts and planners can integrate quantitative models of physical and biological and socioeconomic domains along with the high-level causal knowledge that's extracted from text and other sources in order to support decision-making and management of some of the world's most complex and intractable systems. Okay. So far, we have focused on various mixed initiative AI tools that are designed to expand human cognitive capacities in significant but relatively specific ways. But I mean, come on, it's almost 2020, right? You guys were all expecting that we would have flying cars and replicants by now, right? We want something that's closer to true collaboration with AI in the cognitive process. Well, despite the great advances in recent years, the field of AI has actually made very little progress toward understanding the most important elements in the operating environment, which is humans. In fact, Josh may have already told you about all the progress this morning. The ASSIST program wants to begin to address this by taking motivations from human cognition. Humans intuitively create models of the world around us, and we use those models to conduct thought experiments and evaluate our goals. Here, our blue basketball player is using his mental model to evaluate the probability of scoring in 3 different scenarios. When there are other humans in our environment, we naturally create approximations of their mental models, which we use to predict their actions or their reactions. The ability we use for this is known as the theory of mind. Here, the green ball player on the left is making a break for the basket, and he infers, by observing the actions of his teammate, that his teammate perceives the opportunity and thus predicts that he will pass him the ball for the easy layup. When humans form teams to conduct complex operations, the mental models of the individuals in the team can become extremely complex. In order to perform at a high level in these situations, humans naturally sync key aspects of their mental models to create what are called shared mental models. Our basketball team would have rich shared mental models that would include strategies to enable complex operations, along with contingencies for easy adaptation. Or if any of you are sports fans, that would be what are called plays. I guess. I'm not a sports fan, so I don't actually know. These 2 abilities, the theory of mind and the ability to sync mental models with fellow humans, are the key fundamental aspects of human social intelligence. Working together, they form the basis of human collaboration at all scales, whether the setting is a basketball court or a special operations command or even a crowded freeway. The goal of ASSIST is to demonstrate the basic machine social skills necessary to enable synthetic agents to collaborate effectively with human partners and even to participate in human teams. This is a grand challenge for AI, and we're just looking to take the first step. And that first step is going to be coming out in the next week in the form of a BAA. Please keep your eyes out for it. We also have a Proposers' Day next week on Thursday, so we welcome all of you to join us in the DARPA Conference Center. Okay. It's been 50 years since the mother of all demos. That early vision of human-computer symbiosis more or less defined human technological progress in the decades since. It ended up largely being about faster, bigger, and more precise. It came along with a strong side of brittle, but it helped us to access more data and more information. Along the way, through the usual waves and winters that we hear so much about, AI has made significant progress in specialized applications. But artificial general intelligence is still 20 or maybe 15 or maybe 500 years away. In the meantime, human-AI symbiosis could make these years intellectually the most creative and exciting in the history of humankind. We've made a lot of progress with mixed initiative technologies, as I said. But true human-AI symbiosis will be flexible and adaptive, and sometimes even argumentative. It will help us to discover and synthesize knowledge, explore abstract problem spaces, generate new ideas, and build rich understanding and intuition. As always, DARPA will be there leading the way, supporting these wild ideas that just might change the future. Thank you. I get questions on little cards. Question 1 is, with regard to human-AI symbiosis, how will humans need to adapt to fully exploit its potential? Do you see human adaptability or lack thereof as a hindrance or a help? Man, that's a good question. So the way that we've sort of approached this, especially in sort of the human-machine teaming area, is that we actually don't even know right now what are the appropriate sort of theoretical constructs for successful emergent hybrid human and synthetic teams. There's reasonably good theory around human-human teams, about what makes a successful one. So I showed you, highlighted one theory of sort of the shared mental model approach, but there are many others. It's still an open research question, and that's why ASSIST is a very 6-1 fundamental research program where we are attempting to address a lot of those questions. I would also say that one of the really interesting things that I think I learned from talking to Dave Gunning is that humans have this tendency to think of machines as being peers, and if they're not immediately as sophisticated and communicative as their, the scientists next door to them, they immediately become annoyed and frustrated with them. Whereas in point of fact, we should be thinking of them like 3-year-olds and trying to actually help them and train them up. So I think that might be a form of adaptability that would be helpful. Question 2. With regard to ASCII and the extraction of knowledge from different documents, how is the occurrence of conflicting sources handled? For example, when multiple studies of the same phenomenon reach different conclusions. So this is something that comes up in many of our programs for knowledge extraction and organization. And it's a bit of a sticky problem. There's no one easy answer. You can try to evaluate measures of sort of bias or reliability of particular measures. You can look for the number of times a specific, say, causal assertion has been extracted from specific text and look at the balance between the positives and the negatives or directionality. Or you can acknowledge that there's generally not one reality, not one sort of factual reality in the world. There can be disagreements. And that a model of the world, even within many scientific communities, can be multifaceted and sort of embrace a sort of multiverse perspective on these things. Question 3. With regard to the ASSIST program and theory of mind, what are the grander implications of these developments down the line, say 15 or 20 or 500 years from now? Very, very creative with the 15 or 20 or 500. That's nice, I like that. The grander implications. So, our objective in ASSIST is a little bit more specific. So we're trying to create artificial social intelligence that a subject matter, at the level of sort of a subject matter expert, so that you have an artificial agent that has a certain expertise and also has a sufficient amount of social intelligence to be able to use that expertise and provide that expertise at the appropriate times and appropriate places and et cetera, and understand what a human needs and what they're going to do. This is, in some sense, very, very different from, for example, the kinds of theory of mind work that Josh Tenenbaum was talking about this morning and creating an 18-month-old. If your target use case is, a synthetic agent that can help out a UAV team, for example, having a 18-month-old is not going to be particularly valuable, I assume. What we're looking for is social intelligence that is not general in its applicability, but is very specific in its domain. So, projecting that forward, I would say that our objective is to be able to have synthetic agents that can work in these important, dedicated, sort of specialized environments, such as with a cyber team, in an airplane cockpit, in a UAV crew, on a disaster response team, and that can actually understand, based on the actions of their teammates, can understand what they're thinking and what their goals are, and can assist them without, having to be told. That's all my questions. Thank you very much.